The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web that stretches from the smallest creature to the largest star. It flows through hyperspace lanes and ancient temples, through battlefields and quiet worlds forgotten by history. For thousands of years, the Jedi believed this connection was stable, eternal, and balanced by the careful struggle between light and dark. Yet there were moments when even the oldest masters feared something deeper, something vast enough to shake the galaxy itself. Because the Force did not only connect life within the galaxy. It touched the fabric of reality itself. And on one fateful night during the reign of the Empire, that fabric began to tear. The galaxy was deep in the shadow of Imperial rule. The Jedi Order had been shattered decades earlier by the execution of Order 66, leaving only scattered survivors hiding in forgotten corners of the Outer Rim. Across countless systems, the Galactic Empire ruled through overwhelming military power, its fleets of star destroyers enforcing the will of Emperor Palpatine. Fear had replaced hope. Stormtroopers marched through city streets from Coruscant to distant mining colonies, and Imperial governors crushed any whisper of rebellion. In this atmosphere of control and oppression, most citizens believed the Empire would endure forever. Few realized that something far greater than politics or war was about to challenge the galaxy's fate. It began with hyperspace. For millennia, hyperspace had been the foundation of galactic civilization. Vast networks of hyperspace lanes allowed ships to travel between star systems faster than light, linking thousands of worlds into a single interconnected civilization. Navigators relied on carefully charted routes to avoid catastrophic collisions with stars or black holes, and starships used sophisticated navicomputers to guide them through the strange dimension beyond normal space. But hyperspace had always been unpredictable. Ancient explorers spoke of regions where navigation systems malfunctioned or where ships vanished without explanation. Most dismissed these stories as exaggerations or the result of outdated charts. That belief changed the moment the first rift appeared. The crew of an Imperial patrol vessel orbiting the mid-rim world of Ord Mantell were the first to see it. At first it appeared on sensors as a simple hyperspace disturbance, a minor anomaly similar to the one sometimes caused by gravitational fluctuations. But within seconds the readings became impossible. The disturbance expanded rapidly, twisting the hyperspace field around it like a vortex forming inside the void. Sensor officers struggled to interpret the data as the anomaly grew brighter and more unstable. Then the rift opened. A violent flash of blue-white energy erupted in orbit above the planet, tearing through hyperspace like a wound ripped open in reality. Imperial scanners registered a burst of radiation unlike anything previously recorded, a mixture of hyperspace energy and something else entirely. The rift expanded outward into a swirling storm of distorted light, stretching kilometers across the darkness of space. Even veteran officers who had served in dozens of battles stared at the phenomenon in stunned silence. Moments later, something emerged from the storm. At first, the Imperial crew believed they were witnessing the arrival of a starship exiting hyperspace. But the object moving through the rift was far too large and far too irregular in shape. It did not resemble any known vessel in the Imperial database. Jagged structures protruded from its surface like massive organic growths, glowing faintly with an eerie green light. As it drifted fully into normal space, the anomaly behind it began to collapse, shrinking back into a narrow tear before vanishing completely. The mysterious object hung silently in orbit above Ord Mantell. Imperial officers scrambled to analyze the readings. The object was massive, larger than a star destroyer, yet it emitted no recognizable propulsion signals. Its structure appeared partially organic, partially mechanical, as though it had been grown rather than constructed. Even more troubling were the energy signatures emanating from its surface. The scanners detected unfamiliar radiation patterns that did not match any known technology in the galaxy. Before the crew could decide how to respond, a second hyperspace rift opened. This one appeared much farther away, near the edge of the system. Another violent explosion of distorted light tore through space, briefly illuminating the distant stars. And once again something emerged from the swirling storm. This time the object resembled a warship, sleek, angular, and covered in unfamiliar weapon systems that glowed with pulsating energy. Within minutes, a third rift appeared. Then a fourth. Across the Ord Mantell system, hyperspace itself seemed to unravel. Each rift opened with explosive force, ejecting unknown vessels, debris, or fragments of strange machinery into normal space. Some of the objects resembled spacecraft. Others were massive alien structures whose purpose defied explanation. None matched any known design from the Republic, the Empire, or the countless independent systems scattered across the galaxy. The Imperial patrol ship immediately transmitted an emergency report to Coruscant. Within hours, the Empire declared a regional security alert. But the events on Ord Mantell were only the beginning. Far across the galaxy, similar rifts began appearing in other star systems. On the distant world of Mon Cala, fishermen watching the night sky saw the stars twist and ripple as a shimmering tear opened above the ocean. Something enormous fell from the rift and crashed into the water, sending massive waves crashing against the coastal cities. On a barren outer rim moon near the borders of Hutt space, smugglers witnessed an entire fleet of unfamiliar ships emerge from a glowing vortex before scattering across the system like startled predators. Even the core worlds were not spared. Above Coruscant itself, sensors briefly detected a hyperspace distortion forming beyond the planet's orbital defense grid. Imperial commanders reacted instantly, deploying dozens of TIE fighter squadrons to investigate the anomaly before it could fully open. But the disturbance collapsed before anything emerged, leaving behind only faint traces of unknown radiation drifting through space. To the Empire's military analysts, the phenomenon appeared random and unpredictable. But elsewhere in the galaxy, those sensitive to the Force experienced something far more disturbing. In the shadowy ruins of an ancient Jedi temple hidden on a remote world, an old man meditating in silence suddenly opened his eyes. He had felt the disturbance the moment it began. The force around him churned violently, like an ocean thrown into chaos by an unseen storm. For decades he had lived in hiding, sensing only faint echoes of the galaxy's suffering as the Empire tightened its grip on countless worlds. But this was different. The energy rippling through the Force felt deeper and far more ancient than the rise of the Sith or the fall of the Jedi. It felt as though reality itself had shifted. The old Jedi rose slowly from his meditation position and stepped outside the temple's crumbling walls. The night sky above him seemed unchanged, yet the Force whispered warnings in every direction. Something vast had awakened within the fabric of existence, something older than the Republic and perhaps older than the Jedi Order itself. Elsewhere, another presence felt the disturbance as well. Deep within the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine stood alone in a darkened chamber overlooking the endless cityscape. The towering windows reflected the glow of thousands of distant lights as the ruler of the galaxy contemplated the sudden wave of anomalies spreading through hyperspace. Palpatine was no ordinary politician. As a master of the Sith and the most powerful practitioner of the dark side in generations, he sensed the currents of the Force more clearly than almost anyone alive. For years he had manipulated those currents to orchestrate the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. Yet even he had never felt anything like the disturbance now spreading across the galaxy. It was not simply a tremor in the Force. It was a fracture. Palpatine closed his eyes and reached outward with his senses, allowing the dark side to guide his awareness through the vast web of life and energy that bound the galaxy together. What he perceived filled him not with fear, but with fascination. Something beyond the galaxy had begun interacting with the Force itself. Entire regions of hyperspace were destabilizing, creating rifts between dimensions that had never before touched one another. Palpatine sensed unfamiliar presences emerging from those rifts, minds and energies that did not belong to the galaxy he had conquered. Other realities were bleeding into his empire. Slowly, a smile spread across the Emperor's face. Most beings would have viewed such an event as a catastrophe. The collapse of dimensional barriers threatened to destabilize hyperspace routes, disrupt entire planetary systems, and introduce unknown forces into the fragile balance of galactic power. Entire civilizations might be at risk if the phenomenon continued. But Palpatine saw something else entirely. Opportunity. If the rifts continued opening, they could grant access to technologies, armies, and powers from countless other universes. A ruler capable of controlling such forces would not merely dominate a single galaxy, he could reshape the destiny of every reality connected by the Convergence. The Emperor summoned his most feared enforcer. Within minutes, the towering black-armored figure of Darth Vader entered the chamber, his mechanical breathing echoing through the shadows as he knelt before his master. The Sith Lord had already felt the disturbance in the Force, though he could not yet comprehend its full meaning. Palpatine turned toward him, eyes glowing faintly with dark side power. "The galaxy is changing, Lord Vader," the Emperor said softly. "Hyperspace itself is tearing open." Vader remained silent, waiting for further instruction. Palpatine's smile widened. "Other universes are beginning to emerge within our own." The Sith Lord slowly rose to his feet. Through the Force he sensed the truth behind his master's words. The disturbance spreading across the galaxy was not a natural phenomenon. It was something far more dangerous and far more powerful. A convergence of realities had begun. And if it continued, the Empire would soon face forces unlike anything it had ever encountered. But Palpatine had no intention of simply defending his territory. He intended to control the collapse itself. If the multiverse was truly colliding inside the Star Wars galaxy, then the one who mastered that collision would become the most powerful being in existence. As hyperspace rifts continued opening across the stars, the galaxy stood on the brink of a transformation beyond imagination. The age of the Empire was about to become the age of infinite realities. And this was only the beginning. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. In the hours following the first hyperspace rifts, confusion spread across the galaxy faster than any Imperial order could contain it. Reports flooded into Coruscant from dozens of systems, each describing impossible phenomena: glowing fractures tearing open space, unfamiliar vessels appearing without hyperspace signatures, entire objects emerging from the void between stars as if reality itself had begun rejecting its own boundaries. At first, Imperial intelligence assumed these incidents were isolated anomalies. But as the reports multiplied, it became clear that something far larger was unfolding. The galaxy was experiencing a phenomenon unlike anything in recorded history. In the core worlds, panic began spreading through the civilian population. Holonet transmissions showed distorted footage captured by planetary defense satellites. Massive ships appearing without warning, storms of strange radiation rippling across hyperspace routes, and unfamiliar celestial objects suddenly occupying regions that had been empty moments earlier. Imperial authorities attempted to suppress the footage, but information traveled quickly through smuggler networks and independent communication relays. Within a single day, rumors of a hyperspace collapse were spreading across thousands of worlds. Coruscant itself remained outwardly calm, but beneath the surface the Empire's vast military apparatus was shifting into motion. The Imperial Security Bureau classified the phenomenon as a Class 1 galactic crisis, placing the entire fleet on heightened alert. Admirals began repositioning Star Destroyer battle groups across key hyperspace corridors, preparing to intercept whatever forces might emerge from the expanding network of rifts. The Emperor demanded answers. Deep inside the Imperial Palace, the galaxy's most powerful scientists, navigators, and Force scholars gathered in a sealed briefing chamber to present their findings. Holographic projections filled the room with maps of hyperspace distortions spreading across the galaxy like cracks in a pane of glass. The pattern was unmistakable. The rifts were multiplying. Each one formed when hyperspace itself destabilized, briefly exposing a turbulent region of energy that seemed to connect different dimensions of reality. Most collapsed within minutes, but others remained open long enough to allow objects, ships, debris, or entire structures to pass through. More troubling was the nature of those objects. Imperial analysts had already cataloged dozens of arrivals, and none matched any known design from within the galaxy. Some vessels resembled advanced warships, armed with unfamiliar weapon systems and propulsion technology far beyond the Empire's understanding. Others appeared partially organic, composed of living material fused with machinery. And some were not ships at all. One report described a massive creature drifting through space near the outer rim world of Jakku, a biological entity the size of a small asteroid, surrounded by strange energy fields that allowed it to survive in vacuum. Another report from a mining colony in the mid-rim described armored warriors arriving through a rift and engaging local security forces with weapons that fired bolts of crackling blue energy. The Empire had spent decades cataloging every major species and technology within the galaxy. These arrivals belonged to none of them. Standing before the holographic projections, Darth Vader observed the data in silence. His towering armored form dominated the chamber as Imperial officers anxiously presented their findings. "Lord Vader," one analyst said cautiously, "we believe the phenomenon may be dimensional in nature." Vader turned his masked gaze toward the speaker. "Explain." The analyst swallowed nervously before continuing. "Our current hypothesis is that hyperspace has begun intersecting with alternate realities. Each rift may be acting as a temporary bridge between universes." The room fell silent. For centuries, scientists had speculated about the existence of parallel realities beyond their own galaxy. But such theories had always remained abstract, mathematical possibilities rather than observable phenomena. Now those possibilities were becoming reality. Vader considered the implications through the cold logic of his Sith training. If the galaxy truly was colliding with other universes, then the consequences would be immeasurable. Entire civilizations could appear overnight. Unknown technologies might shift the balance of power across the galaxy. Even the Force itself might behave differently if exposed to energies from beyond its natural domain. Yet Vader sensed something deeper than mere scientific anomalies. Through the Force, he could feel the disturbance spreading like a ripple across an invisible ocean. The energy surrounding each rift carried unfamiliar echoes, presences that did not belong to the natural flow of life within the galaxy. Other realities were bleeding into the Force itself. At that moment, another report arrived. An Imperial star destroyer stationed near the outer rim world of Sullust had encountered a fleet of unknown ships emerging from a newly formed rift. The vessels were unlike anything in the Empire's archives. Sleek and angular, surrounded by shimmering energy shields that deflected blaster fire with ease. When Imperial fighters attempted to intercept them, the unknown ships responded with devastating precision. Within minutes, 3 squadrons of TIE fighters had been destroyed. The Star Destroyer's captain ordered a retreat and transmitted a distress signal to Coruscant. The war had begun. Across the galaxy, similar encounters were unfolding. Some arrivals were peaceful explorers, confused travelers who had been pulled from their own realities without warning. Others were armed fleets whose commanders immediately interpreted the unfamiliar stars around them as a hostile environment. When such forces encountered Imperial patrols, the results were often explosive. Meanwhile, the criminal underworld reacted with characteristic opportunism. Smugglers and bounty hunters quickly realized that alien technologies emerging from the rifts could be sold for enormous profit. Within hours, black market dealers began offering weapons and equipment recovered from the arrivals. The Hutts, always quick to exploit chaos, sent agents to investigate the phenomenon. Entire syndicates mobilized fleets of freighters to search for drifting debris near newly formed rifts. For them, the collapse of dimensional barriers was not a disaster. It was a business opportunity. Yet while governments and criminals scrambled to respond, the deeper consequences of the convergence were beginning to unfold within the Force. On distant worlds where Jedi survivors remained hidden, meditation chambers became sites of sudden alarm. Those who still listened to the Force felt it shifting in unpredictable ways. Familiar currents of energy that had once flowed smoothly across the galaxy now collided with unfamiliar vibrations. The Force was encountering something new. For thousands of years it had been shaped by the life within a single galaxy, the countless beings whose thoughts and emotions formed its light and dark currents. But the convergence was introducing energies from countless other realities, each carrying its own laws, powers, and philosophies. The Force itself was adapting. In some regions, Jedi attempting to meditate found their connection temporarily clouded by strange interference. In others, the force seemed amplified, surging with unexpected intensity as unfamiliar energies blended with its natural flow. Some force-sensitive individuals began experiencing visions. They saw galaxies colliding like storms in the night sky, fleets from distant universes clashing above alien worlds, and warriors wielding powers that had never existed within the Star Wars galaxy. The future had become uncertain. Even the Sith struggled to interpret what the Force was showing them. In the depths of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine continued studying the phenomenon with growing fascination. His mastery of the dark side allowed him to probe the disturbance more deeply than any scientist could. What he discovered confirmed his suspicions. The rifts were not random. They were converging toward a central point somewhere deep within hyperspace, a nexus where the boundaries between universes had grown dangerously thin. If that nexus could be located and controlled, it might allow a single ruler to command the flow of entire realities. Palpatine turned away from the holographic displays and gazed out across the endless cityscape of Coruscant. Millions of lights glittered across the surface of the planet, each representing a life that depended on the stability of the galaxy. Soon that stability would vanish. "Lord Vader," the Emperor said quietly. The armored Sith Lord stepped forward. "The convergence is accelerating. Soon the galaxy will face forces beyond anything the Empire has ever encountered." Vader bowed his head slightly. "What is your will, my master?" Palpatine's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Prepare the fleet." Across the galaxy, hyperspace rifts continued opening like wounds in the fabric of existence. Unknown fleets gathered near distant stars. Strange energies spread through the Force. Smugglers hunted alien technologies while Imperial warships mobilized for battles against enemies they barely understood. The galaxy had entered an age no one had foreseen. An age where countless universes were beginning to collide. And somewhere within the swirling chaos of hyperspace, the center of the convergence continued to grow. The first days after the hyperspace rifts appeared were filled with confusion, fear, and speculation across thousands of star systems. But while the Imperial Navy mobilized fleets and smugglers hunted drifting alien technology, a far quieter reaction was unfolding in the hidden corners of the galaxy, among the few remaining Jedi who had survived the fall of their order. For years, those survivors had lived in secrecy. The Empire hunted them relentlessly, sending inquisitors and Imperial agents across the stars to eliminate any trace of the ancient guardians of peace. Most Jedi had adapted by abandoning their former identities, living as wanderers or hermits far from the centers of Imperial control. Yet even in hiding, they still listened to the Force. And the Force was screaming. On a remote desert world in the Outer Rim, a lone Jedi knelt in meditation within the ruins of an abandoned shrine. Once this place had been a temple used by pilgrims seeking wisdom from the Force. Now its stone walls were cracked by centuries of wind and sand, its statues half buried beneath dunes. Yet the energy within the place still lingered, echoing faintly through the broken halls. The Jedi had chosen the location precisely for that reason. Here, the Force spoke more clearly than it did in crowded cities or war-torn worlds. Or at least it had. When the first hyperspace rifts opened, the Jedi felt the disturbance immediately. At first it seemed like a distant tremor in the Force, something strange but not immediately threatening. But within hours the tremor had grown into a storm. The Jedi's eyes snapped open. The Force around him churned violently, shifting and twisting in ways he had never experienced. Normally the Force flowed through the galaxy like a living river, its currents shaped by the thoughts and emotions of countless beings. But now those currents collided with something unfamiliar, something foreign. The Jedi rose slowly, stepping outside the shrine to look up at the night sky. The stars appeared unchanged, yet the Force whispered warnings with every breath of wind across the desert. Images flickered across the Jedi's mind, glowing tears ripping through space, alien ships emerging from swirling vortexes, unknown warriors stepping onto worlds they had never seen before. Other universes. The realization came like a sudden shock. For centuries, the Jedi had studied the mysteries of the Force and the nature of existence itself. Some ancient Jedi philosophers had theorized that reality might contain countless dimensions, each with its own laws and histories. But those theories had always remained philosophical speculation. Until now. The hyperspace rifts were not simply portals between locations. They were bridges between realities. Across the galaxy, other Jedi survivors reached the same conclusion. On a forest moon hidden deep in the mid-rim, a former Jedi Knight stood motionless among towering trees as the Force surged around him like a gathering storm. Birds fled from the branches above as the air vibrated with unfamiliar energy. The Knight had spent years avoiding Imperial patrols, using the Force only sparingly to avoid detection. But the disturbance sweeping through the galaxy was impossible to ignore. He extended his awareness through the Force. Immediately he sensed presences that did not belong to the galaxy. Some felt powerful and disciplined, like warriors trained in unfamiliar combat philosophies. Others radiated chaotic energy unlike anything the Jedi had encountered before. There were minds that burned with rage, others that glowed with brilliant intellect, and still others whose thoughts were so alien that they barely resembled the consciousness of living beings. The Knight staggered slightly as the sensations overwhelmed him. Never before had the Force carried so many unfamiliar echoes. Even stranger was the way those echoes interacted with the Force itself. Some of the new arrivals seemed completely disconnected from the Force, existing outside its natural flow as if they belonged to a different system of reality. Others produced strange distortions in the Force, creating ripples that spread outward across entire star systems. The Knight realized with growing concern that the Jedi's traditional understanding of the Force might not apply to these newcomers. If entire universes were entering the galaxy, then the Force would be forced to coexist with countless other forms of power, magic, advanced technology, cosmic energies unknown to Jedi teachings. For the first time in thousands of years, the Force was encountering forces beyond its own domain. Far away on another hidden world, a Jedi Master sat within the ruins of a long-abandoned temple built during the early days of the Republic. The Master was old, older than most beings still alive in the galaxy, and his connection to the Force was deep enough to sense changes far beyond the reach of ordinary perception. He had spent decades studying ancient Jedi records preserved within the temple's damaged archives. And now those records were beginning to make terrifying sense. Among the scrolls and holocrons stored within the temple were fragments of writings from some of the earliest Jedi scholars. Many of those texts described an event known only as the Convergence. According to the ancient philosophers, the Force did not exist solely within one galaxy. It extended across the fabric of reality itself, connecting infinite possibilities through a network of unseen energy. Most of the time those possibilities remained separated by dimensional barriers that prevented direct interaction. But under certain circumstances, those barriers could weaken. When the balance of the Force was disturbed on a massive scale, through war, destruction, or the actions of powerful Force users, reality itself could become unstable. If the disturbance grew large enough, the boundaries between universes might begin to collapse. The ancient Jedi had feared such an event, because if multiple realities collided, the consequences would be impossible to predict. The Master closed his eyes as the Force roared around him like a storm. Through meditation he reached deeper into the currents of energy flowing across the galaxy. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. The rifts were increasing in both size and number. Entire fleets from other realities were beginning to appear near the edges of the galaxy. Some of those fleets were already encountering Imperial forces or local planetary defenses. Others were drifting through space without clear purpose, their crews likely just as confused as the beings they encountered. The Force itself was beginning to adapt to the arrivals, shifting its patterns to accommodate the new presences. But adaptation would take time. And during that time, chaos would spread. The Jedi Master knew what had to be done. If the Convergence continued unchecked, the collision of universes could eventually destabilize hyperspace routes, disrupt planetary ecosystems, and perhaps even fracture the Force itself. Entire realities might collapse into a single chaotic battlefield. The Jedi needed to understand the phenomenon before it reached that point. But gathering information would not be easy. The Empire controlled most major star systems, and Imperial forces were already moving to investigate the rifts for their own purposes. If the Emperor discovered the true nature of the Convergence, he would almost certainly attempt to exploit it. The thought sent a ripple of dread through the Master's mind. Because if Emperor Palpatine gained control of the Convergence, he might become powerful enough to dominate not just the galaxy, but every universe connected to it. Meanwhile, far above countless planets scattered across the stars, new rifts continued opening. One appeared near the edge of the mid-rim trade routes, releasing a cluster of sleek starships that immediately accelerated away from the glowing vortex behind them. Another erupted near the borders of Hutt space, where smugglers quickly began racing toward the disturbance in hopes of salvaging alien technology. In the distant, unknown regions, a massive tear in hyperspace spat out fragments of enormous structures that drifted silently through space like the ruins of an ancient civilization. Each arrival carried its own story. Each arrival brought new complications. Across the galaxy, Imperial fleets were preparing to confront these unknown forces. Criminal syndicates were scrambling to profit from the chaos. Hidden Jedi were searching for answers within the shifting currents of the Force. And somewhere within hyperspace itself, the center of the Convergence continued growing. The boundaries between universes were weakening faster than anyone had predicted. If nothing stopped the process, the Star Wars galaxy would soon become the meeting point of infinite realities. And when that happened, war would be inevitable. The Imperial response to the spreading hyperspace rifts came with the cold precision of a regime built on absolute control. Within 48 hours of the first confirmed anomalies, fleets across the galaxy received new orders from Coruscant. Patrol patterns were abandoned. Defensive formations were reorganized. Entire sectors were placed under emergency military jurisdiction. What had begun as scattered reports of strange arrivals was now treated as the greatest security threat the Empire had faced since its founding. At the center of that response stood the might of the Imperial Navy. For decades, the Empire had maintained the most powerful military force in galactic history. Thousands of star destroyers patrolled hyperspace lanes, supported by countless squadrons of TIE fighters and legions of stormtroopers stationed on worlds across the galaxy. The Emperor had built this war machine not merely to defeat enemies but to ensure that no uprising or rebellion could ever challenge his rule again. Now that same war machine was preparing to confront an enemy that might not even belong to the galaxy. Admirals gathered in the command halls of Coruscant to receive their orders. Massive holographic maps displayed clusters of hyperspace rifts appearing across the galaxy like spreading fractures. Each new anomaly was marked with flashing indicators showing the arrival of unfamiliar ships or unidentified objects. The pattern was becoming clear. Most rifts appeared along major hyperspace corridors, regions where the fabric of hyperspace was already stressed by heavy traffic. Scientists believed the dimensional barriers were weakest in those areas, allowing energy from other realities to break through. For the Empire, this meant that the heart of galactic commerce and transportation had become the front lines of a new war. One of the first major confrontations occurred in the mid-rim system of Brental. Brental was a critical trade hub where dozens of hyperspace routes intersected. Massive orbital shipyards surrounded the planet, and the system was protected by a permanent Imperial fleet presence. When sensors detected a large rift forming near the outer edge of the system, the local Star Destroyer commander responded immediately. 3 Imperial-class Star Destroyers moved into attack formation as the vortex expanded. From the bridge of the lead destroyer, the commanding officer watched the anomaly with growing unease. The swirling tear in space pulsed with unnatural light, distorting the surrounding stars like reflections in broken glass. Energy readings spiked across every sensor array. Then something emerged. A formation of unknown warships burst from the rift in tight military formation. They were smaller than Star Destroyers but far more numerous. Sleek vessels with curved hulls and glowing blue engines unlike anything in Imperial design catalogs. Each ship carried arrays of unfamiliar weapons mounted along its surface. The Imperial commander wasted no time. "Launch all fighter squadrons," he ordered. "Target the unknown vessels." Hundreds of TIE fighters roared from the hangar bays of the Star Destroyers, their distinctive hexagonal wings flashing against the darkness of space as they accelerated toward the alien fleet. Behind them, the massive destroyers rotated slowly to bring their heavy turbolaser batteries into firing position. The battle began within seconds. TIE fighters opened fire first, their green laser cannons streaking toward the unknown ships. But the alien vessels responded instantly. Brilliant blue energy beams erupted from their hulls, slicing through the incoming fighters with devastating accuracy. Several TIE squadrons were destroyed before they could even reach firing range. The Imperial commander frowned. The enemy was disciplined. More importantly, they were technologically advanced. Turbolasers from the Star Destroyers joined the fight, filling space with massive bursts of crimson energy. The alien fleet scattered into evasive formations, weaving between the incoming fire with surprising agility. Some ships returned fire with concentrated blasts of energy that slammed against the destroyer's shields. Explosions lit the void as the two fleets clashed. For the first time since the Clone Wars, the Empire was fighting an opponent whose capabilities were completely unknown. The battle raged for nearly 20 minutes before the alien fleet abruptly disengaged. Their ships accelerated toward the outer edge of the system, vanishing into hyperspace before the Star Destroyers could pursue. The Imperial fleet had survived. But the cost was sobering. Dozens of TIE fighters had been destroyed, and one Star Destroyer had suffered heavy damage to its shield generators. The enemy fleet had escaped largely intact. Worse still, Imperial analysts now had confirmation that at least some arrivals from the rifts possessed advanced military technology. News of the battle reached Coruscant within hours. Inside the Imperial Palace, Darth Vader studied the combat recordings in silence. The holographic projection showed the alien ships maneuvering through the battlefield with impressive coordination. "They are not explorers," Vader said quietly. An Imperial admiral nodded. "Our analysts believe they are a military force from another reality." Vader turned away from the hologram. "If more fleets like this appear, the Empire will face multiple hostile powers simultaneously." The admiral hesitated before speaking again. "There is another development, Lord Vader." He activated a second holographic display. This one showed footage captured by a long-range probe near the outer rim. The recording depicted a massive hyperspace rift opening near an uninhabited star system. But instead of a fleet emerging from the vortex, something far more unsettling appeared. A colossal structure. The object resembled a gigantic mechanical ring floating in space, hundreds of kilometers in diameter. Strange symbols glowed along its surface, and streams of unfamiliar energy flowed through its interior like rivers of light. The probe's sensors had been unable to determine the structure's purpose. But one thing was clear. It was not a starship, and it had not been built by any civilization known to the Empire. Vader watched the recording carefully. Through the Force he sensed a strange presence surrounding the object, an energy signature unlike anything he had encountered before. It was neither light nor dark. It was something entirely different. "Where is it now?" he asked. "Still in the outer rim," the admiral replied. "The system is currently uninhabited." Vader considered the implications. If structures of that size were emerging from the rifts, the scale of the convergence might be far greater than the Empire had initially assumed. Entire civilizations could be entering the galaxy, which meant the Empire would soon face conflicts far beyond conventional warfare. Meanwhile, far from the centers of Imperial authority, other arrivals were already reshaping the balance of power. In the lawless territories of the Outer Rim, several rifts had opened near Hutt-controlled space. Smugglers quickly discovered that debris drifting from those anomalies included unfamiliar weapons, fragments of strange technology, and even damaged starships. The Hutts wasted no time exploiting the opportunity. Their agents began collecting alien equipment and transporting it to secret laboratories for analysis. Some pieces were sold immediately to the highest bidder on the black market. Within days, bounty hunters across the galaxy were carrying weapons that had not existed a week earlier. The criminal underworld was evolving alongside the Convergence. But the greatest changes were yet to come. Because while fleets and technology were arriving through the rifts, something else had begun crossing into the galaxy as well. Individuals, warriors, explorers, beings from other universes who would soon encounter the Empire, the Jedi, and every other faction struggling to survive the growing chaos. The collision of realities had only just begun, and soon the entire galaxy would become a battlefield. As hyperspace continued tearing open across the galaxy, entire regions of the Outer Rim began transforming into unpredictable frontier zones where the laws of reality no longer seemed reliable. For centuries, the Outer Rim had already been a chaotic frontier beyond the tight control of the core worlds. Imperial governors struggled to maintain authority across its distant sectors, while criminal syndicates, smugglers, and independent warlords operated with relative freedom. But the arrival of multiversal rifts turned this already unstable region into something far more dangerous. Because the Outer Rim was where the most unusual arrivals began appearing. Many of the early rifts opened far from the heavily monitored hyperspace corridors of the core. Instead, they formed near remote systems where gravitational fields and ancient stellar disturbances already stressed the structure of hyperspace. In these regions, the convergence seemed to erupt with greater intensity, producing rifts that remained open long enough for entire fleets, structures, or groups of travelers to pass through. For the Mandalorians, this chaos looked less like disaster and more like opportunity. Mandalorians had always been defined by war. Their warrior culture was forged through centuries of conquest and survival across the galaxy. Though their empire had fallen long before the rise of the Galactic Empire, the Mandalorian people still maintained powerful clans scattered across several systems. Their traditions emphasized combat skill, personal honor, and the pursuit of worthy battles. The Convergence promised battles unlike anything the galaxy had seen in generations. On the world of Concordia, one of the hidden strongholds of Mandalorian warriors, news of the rifts spread quickly through encrypted clan networks. Reports of unknown ships fighting Imperial fleets, alien technologies appearing in smuggler markets, and mysterious warriors emerging from dimensional tiers reached the Mandalorian leadership within hours of the first major incidents. To many Mandalorians, the situation felt like the beginning of a new crusade. Inside a heavily fortified stronghold carved into the Rocky Mountains of Concordia, representatives from several Mandalorian clans gathered around a large tactical display. The holographic projection showed the growing pattern of hyperspace rifts spreading across the Outer Rim. Each new anomaly represented both danger and possibility. The Mandalorian warriors studying the map were among the most experienced fighters in the galaxy. Their armor, forged from nearly indestructible Beskar metal, reflected the dim lights of the command chamber as they discussed the situation with quiet intensity. "The Empire is already sending fleets," one clan leader said, gesturing toward a cluster of red markers representing Imperial Star Destroyers. "They will try to control the rifts." Another Mandalorian shook his helmeted head. "They cannot control something they do not understand." A third warrior leaned forward, examining the symbols representing newly arrived fleets from unknown universes. "Then we must reach them first." The Mandalorians were not interested in defending the galaxy from the Convergence. They were interested in testing themselves against whatever emerged from it. Within hours, Mandalorian strike forces began launching from Concordia and other clan-controlled worlds. Their ships were smaller and more maneuverable than the massive vessels used by the Empire, designed for rapid deployment and close combat. Each carried squads of heavily armed warriors prepared to confront whatever threats or opportunities awaited them near the rifts. For the Mandalorians, the multiversal collapse represented the greatest proving ground in generations. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the Outer Rim, the criminal underworld continued adapting to the chaos in its own way. The Hutts were among the first to recognize the economic potential of the Convergence. For centuries, their cartel had dominated trade and smuggling operations across many frontier systems. Now the arrival of alien technologies and unfamiliar travelers created entirely new markets. On the desert world of Arshada, the infamous smuggler's moon, black markets erupted with activity. Docking bays filled with vessels carrying mysterious cargo recovered from hyperspace anomalies. Traders whispered about weapons capable of piercing starship shields with ease, armor that could resist even lightsaber strikes, and devices that generated energy fields unknown to Imperial science. Some of these claims were exaggerated, others were not. Inside one of Nar Shadda's countless shadowy marketplaces, a group of bounty hunters gathered around a table displaying a strange device recently salvaged from a drifting alien ship. The object resembled a compact generator surrounded by rotating metal rings that emitted faint pulses of blue energy. None of the hunters knew exactly what it did, but rumors suggested it could manipulate gravity itself. In the criminal underworld, knowledge was less important than profit, and profit was flowing faster than ever. Yet while smugglers and warriors prepared to exploit the Convergence, a far more dangerous development was unfolding deeper within the unknown regions of the galaxy. The unknown regions had always been a mysterious expanse beyond the reach of most hyperspace charts. Dangerous gravitational anomalies, unpredictable stellar formations, and ancient ruins made navigation extremely difficult. Even the Empire had limited knowledge of what lay beyond those distant stars. It was here that one of the largest hyperspace rifts yet recorded began forming. Imperial probes monitoring the edge of the region detected the anomaly first. At first it appeared similar to the other rifts spreading across the galaxy, a localized distortion in hyperspace accompanied by unusual energy readings. But this one did not collapse. Instead it continued expanding. Within minutes the vortex grew to hundreds of kilometers in diameter, swirling with chaotic energy that distorted nearby stars into twisted reflections. Sensor readings from the probe became increasingly unstable as the rift intensified. Then the first object emerged. It was enormous. The vessel that drifted out of the rift dwarfed even the largest Imperial warships. Its hull was dark and angular, covered in complex geometric structures that glowed faintly with violet energy. Dozens of smaller craft followed behind it, forming a fleet that stretched across the surrounding void. The probe's sensors attempted to scan the vessels, but the results were almost incomprehensible. The ships were powered by energy sources unlike anything found within the Star Wars galaxy. Their propulsion systems generated distortions in space itself, allowing them to maneuver without conventional thrusters. And their weapons, if that was what the protruding structures along their hulls represented, radiated energy signatures that suggested devastating destructive potential. The fleet moved slowly away from the rift, spreading into defensive formations as if its commanders were already preparing for battle. But what made the situation truly alarming was the presence of something else inside the vortex. The rift continued expanding, and more fleets were approaching from the other side. Across the galaxy, similar events were beginning to unfold. New arrivals appeared in clusters near the expanding network of hyperspace anomalies. Some of these newcomers attempted to communicate with local civilizations, seeking allies or information about their sudden displacement. Others arrived already prepared for war. The collision of universes was not a peaceful meeting. It was becoming a gathering storm. Back on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine studied the latest reports with growing interest. Each new fleet, each unfamiliar technology, represented another piece of a puzzle he intended to solve. If the Convergence continued accelerating, the Star Wars galaxy would soon become the crossroads of countless realities. And whoever mastered that crossroads would possess power beyond imagination. Palpatine had no intention of letting that power fall into anyone else's hands. The Emperor turned toward Darth Vader. "Send our agents to the Outer Rim," he commanded. "We must learn everything about these arrivals." Vader bowed his head. "It will be done, my master." Across the stars, hyperspace rifts continued spreading like cracks in the fabric of existence. And the Mandalorians, the Hutts, the Empire, and countless other factions were already moving to claim whatever emerged from the chaos. The war of realities was drawing closer. The deeper the Convergence spread across the galaxy, the less predictable the situation became. What had begun as scattered hyperspace rifts releasing strange ships and mysterious technologies was now evolving into something far more complex. Entire star systems were experiencing distortions in hyperspace navigation. Some established trade routes became dangerously unstable, while new corridors suddenly appeared where none had existed before. Navigation computers across the galaxy struggled to adjust to the shifting structure of space itself. But the most profound changes were happening among the galaxy's most adaptable population: smugglers. For generations, smugglers had thrived in the shadows of galactic politics. While the Republic once attempted to regulate trade and the Empire now enforced strict shipping controls, smugglers operated between those systems of authority. They knew hidden hyperspace routes, secret landing zones, and the complex web of criminal syndicates that stretched across the outer rim. When chaos appeared, smugglers did not panic. They adapted. And the Convergence had created the greatest opportunity in smuggling history. On Arshada, the smuggler's moon, docking towers filled with ships arriving from across the galaxy. Some captains carried cargo recovered from alien wreckage. Others brought rumors about mysterious travelers appearing on distant worlds. The cantinas of the city buzzed with speculation as smugglers traded stories about the expanding hyperspace anomalies. One pilot claimed he had seen an entire city floating inside a rift before it collapsed. Another swore he had encountered warriors wearing armor that could absorb blaster bolts without leaving a mark. Most listeners assumed the stories were exaggerations, until the merchandise started appearing. Inside the crowded markets of Arshada, traders displayed weapons that did not resemble anything produced within the galaxy. One vendor offered a rifle capable of firing bursts of blue energy that curved through the air before striking their target. Another displayed a compact device that could generate a personal energy shield strong enough to deflect blaster fire. Even seasoned bounty hunters stared at the unfamiliar equipment with cautious interest. The arrival of alien technology was reshaping the criminal economy overnight. Among the smugglers navigating this new world of opportunity was a veteran pilot named Kessa Varn. Kessa had spent years flying cargo between remote systems, avoiding Imperial patrols while delivering shipments for various criminal syndicates. She was known for two things: her ability to find profitable routes through dangerous territory and her willingness to take risks others would avoid. Which was why she had decided to investigate a newly formed rift reported near the outer rim system of Artis. Her freighter, the Wandering Comet, dropped out of hyperspace several million kilometers from the anomaly. The ship's cockpit filled with the glow of swirling blue light as the rift came into view. Even after hearing dozens of stories about the phenomenon, Kessa felt a chill run through her spine. The vortex was enormous. A storm of distorted energy twisted through space like a cosmic whirlpool, stretching across hundreds of kilometers. Lightning-like tendrils of hyperspace energy flickered across its surface while fragments of debris drifted slowly outward. Some of those fragments were pieces of starships. Others looked like machinery she could not identify. Kessa carefully maneuvered the Wandering Comet closer to the outer edge of the anomaly. Her scanners immediately filled with chaotic readings, struggling to interpret the strange energy patterns surrounding the rift. Then something unexpected happened. A ship emerged from the vortex. It was smaller than most vessels she had seen appear from rifts, a sleek craft with a curved silver hull and glowing engine ports. The ship drifted for a moment as if its pilot was struggling to orient themselves in the unfamiliar star system. Kessa frowned. The vessel did not appear to be damaged, which meant someone inside it was very much alive. The smuggler hesitated for only a moment before opening a communication channel. "Unknown vessel," she transmitted. "You're drifting close to a dangerous hyperspace anomaly. Identify yourself." There was a brief pause before a response arrived. The voice on the other end sounded confused. This isn't our star system. Navigation says we've traveled impossibly far." Kessa leaned forward. "Yeah," she muttered. "Welcome to the club." Across the galaxy, encounters like this were becoming increasingly common. Not every arrival from the rifts was a military fleet or mysterious structure. Many were travelers who had been caught in the collapse of dimensional barriers without warning. Some were explorers. Others were refugees from conflicts in their own universes. Few understood what had happened to them, and even fewer knew how to survive in a galaxy ruled by the Empire. Some of these newcomers quickly found themselves recruited by smugglers or criminal syndicates eager to exploit their unfamiliar skills. Others fell into the hands of Imperial authorities, who began capturing arrivals for interrogation and scientific study. The Empire wanted to understand the convergence. The underworld wanted to profit from it. But another group had begun taking a different approach entirely. Bounty hunters. Across the Outer Rim, bounty hunters realized that the convergence was creating a new kind of target. Imperial authorities were offering large rewards for the capture of certain arrivals, especially those carrying advanced technology or unusual abilities. Meanwhile, criminal syndicates offered competing contracts for the same individuals. The result was a galaxy-wide hunt for newcomers from other universes. One of the most feared bounty hunters in the Outer Rim had already accepted several such contracts. Flying through hyperspace aboard a heavily armed starship, the armored figure known as Drax Core studied the holographic image of his latest target. The projection showed a humanoid traveler who had emerged from a rift near the mid-rim world of Corellia. Imperial intelligence believed the newcomer possessed unusual combat abilities, which meant the bounty was enormous. Drax Core had no interest in the politics behind the convergence. To him, it was simply another source of profit. As his ship exited hyperspace near Corellia, the bounty hunter activated his scanners and began searching for the target signal. Elsewhere, Imperial forces were conducting their own investigations. Across dozens of systems, specialized task forces were dispatched to study the rifts and capture any individuals emerging from them. Scientists and military officers worked together to analyze alien technologies while intelligence agents attempted to interrogate newcomers about their origins. But despite all these efforts, the Empire still lacked a clear understanding of the phenomenon itself. Only one person seemed confident about the true potential of the convergence: Emperor Palpatine. Within the dark chambers of the Imperial Palace, the Sith Lord continued exploring the disturbance through the Force. Each new arrival, each unfamiliar presence, added another thread to the growing web of energy surrounding the galaxy. The Force was adapting to the collision of realities. But Palpatine was already planning how to control it. Because if he could master the nexus at the center of the convergence, the Emperor would not simply rule the galaxy. He would rule every universe connected to it. And soon, the galaxy's factions, Imperial fleets, Mandalorian warriors, criminal syndicates, and multiversal arrivals, would collide in a struggle for control of the most powerful phenomenon in existence. The age of quiet exploration was ending. The age of multiversal war was beginning. The longer the convergence continued, the more the Force itself began to shift in response to the collision of realities. What had once been a stable balance between light and dark was now becoming something far more unpredictable. Across the galaxy, Force-sensitive individuals began experiencing visions unlike anything recorded in Jedi or Sith history. Some saw stars collapsing into spiraling voids. Others saw vast fleets from unknown galaxies descending upon familiar worlds. Still others glimpsed flashes of warriors wielding powers that did not belong to the Force at all. For most Jedi survivors hiding throughout the Empire, these visions brought fear. For Emperor Palpatine, they brought revelation. Deep within the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, the Sith Lord stood inside a chamber older than the Republic itself. The room had once belonged to an ancient Sith cult long before the planet became the capital of galactic civilization. The Emperor had secretly preserved the chamber beneath the palace, filling it with relics and holocrons recovered from across the galaxy. Now the chamber's dark stone walls pulsed faintly with the energy of the convergence. Palpatine stood motionless at the center of a circular meditation platform. Around him, dozens of Sith artifacts floated slowly in the air, suspended by invisible currents of the dark side. The Emperor's eyes were closed, his mind reaching outward through the Force. What he sensed confirmed everything he had begun to suspect. The convergence was not merely a catastrophic accident. It was a doorway. Through the rifts, the Emperor could feel fragments of other realities touching the Force for the first time. Some of those presences were weak and confused. Others radiated immense power. Each arrival carried a different energy signature, shaped by the laws of its original universe. Most importantly, those energies could be manipulated. Palpatine opened his eyes slowly. If he could master the convergence point where all those realities intersected, he would control the gateway between universes themselves. Entire civilizations could be bent to his will. Infinite resources, armies, and technologies could be drawn into his empire. The Sith had always sought ultimate power. The Convergence offered something even greater: infinite dominion. The Emperor activated a nearby holocron, projecting a star map into the air. Countless glowing markers represented the hyperspace rifts spreading across the galaxy. At the center of the pattern, a cluster of anomalies had begun forming deep within the unknown regions. That cluster was growing faster than the others. Palpatine sensed it clearly through the Force. The center of the Convergence. If the rifts were cracks in reality, then this region was where those cracks would eventually merge into a single fracture large enough to reshape the galaxy itself. But reaching that region would not be simple. The unknown regions were already dangerous due to unstable hyperspace routes and unpredictable stellar phenomena. Now the arrival of fleets from other universes had turned the area into a chaotic battlefield. Still, Palpatine had no intention of allowing anyone else to reach the convergence point first. He summoned Darth Vader once again. The towering Sith Lord entered the chamber silently, his black armor reflecting the eerie glow of the floating holocron projection. Through the Force he could already feel the unnatural energy radiating from the chamber's walls. "The disturbances grow stronger," Vader said. "Yes," Palpatine replied softly. "And soon they will reach their climax." The Emperor gestured toward the star map. "The convergence point lies here, in the unknown regions." Vader studied the cluster of anomalies. "Other forces will attempt to reach it." Palpatine's smile was thin and calculating. "They will try." The Emperor extended a hand toward the projection, enlarging the cluster of rifts. "But they will fail." Palpatine turned to face his apprentice fully. "You will lead a fleet into the unknown regions, Lord Vader. Secure the convergence point before our enemies understand its true significance." Vader bowed his head slightly. "It will be done." Within hours, the Imperial Navy began assembling a massive expeditionary fleet. Several Star Destroyer battle groups were ordered to prepare for a journey into the chaotic territories beyond the known hyperspace lanes. Their mission was simple: reach the center of the convergence. Claim it for the Empire. Yet the Empire was not the only faction moving toward that destination. Far beyond Imperial space, Mandalorian scouts had also detected the growing cluster of rifts. Their warriors interpreted the phenomenon differently than the Empire did. To them, the convergence point represented the greatest battlefield imaginable, a place where champions from countless realities would eventually clash. Mandalorian clans began preparing their own fleets to investigate the region. Meanwhile, the criminal syndicates saw the convergence point as the ultimate treasure trove. If alien technologies were appearing near ordinary rifts, then the center of the phenomenon might contain artifacts beyond imagination. Even smugglers like Kessa Varn had begun hearing rumors about the mysterious region forming in the unknown regions. Rumors of a place where entire universes touched. But none of these factions understood the true danger, because the convergence was beginning to attract something else. From the far side of one expanding rift, a fleet of colossal warships began moving through the vortex in disciplined formation. Their vessels were massive and angular, surrounded by glowing energy fields that warped the surrounding starlight. Behind them came hundreds more ships. The fleet was not drifting aimlessly. It was advancing toward the center of the convergence. Elsewhere, another rift released a swarm of smaller vessels that moved with insect-like coordination. Their organic hulls pulsed with eerie biological light as they spread across nearby star systems. Some arrivals came in peace. Others came prepared for conquest. Across the galaxy, hyperspace storms intensified as the dimensional barriers weakened further. Entire sectors began experiencing disruptions in navigation systems. Planets reported strange celestial phenomena as fragments of unfamiliar constellations appeared in their night skies. Reality itself was shifting. Back on Coruscant, Palpatine sensed the growing chaos with quiet satisfaction. Every new fleet entering the galaxy meant new forces he could potentially dominate. Every new technology represented another tool to expand his empire. The Sith Lord's ambitions had always been vast. Now they stretched across infinite realities. But even Palpatine could not yet see the full consequences of the convergence. Because somewhere within the swirling nexus of collapsing dimensions, forces far older and more powerful than the Empire were beginning to awaken. And when those forces finally reached the Star Wars galaxy, the war between universes would truly begin. The galaxy had endured countless wars throughout its history. The ancient conflicts between Jedi and Sith had scarred entire star systems. The Clone Wars had transformed peaceful worlds into battlefields filled with droid armies and clone troopers. Even the rise of the Galactic Empire had been forged through violence and manipulation. Yet none of those conflicts had prepared the galaxy for what was coming, because the convergence was no longer simply opening rifts between universes. It was drawing them together. Across hyperspace, the dimensional fractures that had once appeared randomly were beginning to align. Navigation sensors across the galaxy detected massive gravitational disturbances forming deep within the unknown regions. Hyperspace routes warped around the phenomenon like rivers converging toward a single point. The center of the convergence had begun to stabilize. For the first time since the anomalies started appearing, scientists and force-sensitive observers alike realized what was happening. Every rift was feeding energy toward one location. A nexus where countless universes were beginning to overlap. And every major faction in the galaxy was racing toward it. The Imperial Expeditionary Fleet arrived first. Led by Darth Vader's flagship, a massive Imperial-class star destroyer known as the Dominion, the Imperial Task Force emerged from hyperspace on the outer edge of the unknown regions. The fleet consisted of 7 star destroyers accompanied by support vessels and hundreds of TIE fighter squadrons. It was one of the largest concentrations of Imperial firepower assembled since the early years of the Empire. Yet even this formidable force seemed small compared to what awaited them. At the center of the system floated the convergence point. The site was unlike anything Vader or his officers had ever witnessed. Space itself appeared fractured. A gigantic vortex of swirling hyperspace energy dominated the system, stretching across thousands of kilometers like a cosmic storm. Within the vortex, flashes of other star systems flickered in and out of view, brief glimpses of alien skies, unfamiliar planets, and distant galaxies that did not belong to this reality. It was as if the fabric of existence had folded inward on itself. Sensors struggled to interpret the phenomenon. Energy readings fluctuated wildly as multiple dimensions overlapped inside the vortex. Even the force felt unstable, surging and retreating in unpredictable waves. Through the force, Vader sensed countless presences on the far side of the rift. Entire civilizations, warriors, creatures, fleets, all converging toward the same destination. The convergence point was becoming a crossroads of realities. But the Empire had not arrived alone. Long-range scanners soon detected multiple incoming fleets emerging from hyperspace at the edges of the system. The first to appear were Mandalorian warships. Their sleek, heavily armored vessels dropped from hyperspace in tight formations, their hulls marked with the distinctive sigils of several warrior clans. The Mandalorians had followed the trail of rifts across the outer rim until it led them directly to the convergence point. For them, the scene unfolding before them was nothing short of legendary. Never before had so many unknown forces gathered in a single place. The Mandalorians immediately began deploying reconnaissance fighters, eager to explore the edges of the vortex and identify potential enemies worthy of battle. Next came a flotilla of independent ships, smugglers, mercenaries, and bounty hunters drawn by rumors of unimaginable technology waiting within the convergence. Their vessels were smaller and more chaotic in formation, but many were heavily armed. Even criminal syndicates had arrived. Farther out, another fleet materialized. This one did not resemble anything native to the Star Wars galaxy. Dozens of alien warships emerged from hyperspace with silent precision. Their hulls glowed with faint violet light, and their propulsion systems distorted the surrounding space as they maneuvered into position. Unlike the Mandalorians or smugglers, these vessels moved with disciplined coordination. They had not come to observe. They had come to claim the Convergence. More fleets followed. Some arrived from within the Star Wars galaxy itself. Imperial patrols responding to emergency signals, rogue mercenary groups hoping to profit from the chaos, and even a handful of rebel-aligned scouts attempting to understand the phenomenon. Others came through the rifts themselves. Entire armadas from unknown universes emerged directly into the system, their commanders likely just as determined to control the Nexus as the factions already present. Within hours, the Convergence system became the most crowded battlefield in galactic history. Hundreds of warships filled the surrounding space. Thousands of fighters launched from hangars as commanders attempted to secure territory near the vortex. Tensions grew rapidly as fleets maneuvered for strategic positions. The Empire acted first. From the bridge of the Dominion, Darth Vader issued the order. All vessels form defensive perimeter, he commanded. Imperial Star Destroyers spread into a protective formation around the Convergence point, their massive hulls bristling with turbolaser batteries. TIE fighter squadrons launched in waves, establishing patrol patterns around the system. Vader intended to control access to the vortex. Any fleet attempting to approach would have to pass through Imperial firepower. But the Mandalorians had no intention of accepting Imperial authority. Within minutes of the Imperial fleet establishing its perimeter, Mandalorian warships began advancing toward the center of the system. Their commanders ignored Imperial warnings, flying directly toward the Convergence vortex as if daring the Empire to stop them. The first shots of the multiversal war were fired moments later. Imperial turbolasers streaked across space toward the approaching Mandalorian ships. In response, Mandalorian vessels returned fire with heavy plasma cannons capable of punching through even Star Destroyer shields. The battle escalated instantly. Fighter squadrons from both sides clashed in the void, weaving through explosions as massive capital ships exchanged devastating volleys of energy. Other fleets soon joined the fight. Alien warships advanced toward the vortex, engaging both Imperial and Mandalorian forces in fierce combat. Smuggler vessels darted through the battlefield, attempting to salvage wreckage or escape before the fighting intensified further. The Convergence system had become a chaotic war zone. Amid the growing conflict, the vortex itself continued expanding. Dimensional lightning crackled across its surface as new rifts opened within the swirling storm. Through those rifts, even larger fleets were beginning to appear. Entire universes were arriving. From the bridge of the Dominion, Darth Vader watched the battle unfold with calm determination. The chaos surrounding the vortex only confirmed what he had already sensed through the Force. This was only the beginning. The real war had not yet started. Because somewhere within the Convergence itself, forces far more powerful than fleets or armies were approaching the Star Wars galaxy. And when they arrived, the fate of every universe connected to the Nexus would be decided. The Convergence system had become the most volatile battlefield the galaxy had ever witnessed. Hundreds of fleets from multiple realities now crowded the star system surrounding the massive dimensional vortex. Warships from unfamiliar civilizations clashed with Imperial Star Destroyers. Mandalorian strike craft darted through the chaos, striking isolated targets with brutal efficiency. Smuggler vessels attempted to slip through the conflict to salvage valuable debris while bounty hunters hunted newcomers carrying rare technologies. But even as the battle intensified, something far more significant was happening within the vortex itself. The dimensional storm was growing. At the center of the system, the colossal rift pulsed with unstable energy, expanding outward as more universes collided within it. Lightning-like arcs of hyperspace distortion surged across the vortex's surface, and the swirling interior began revealing clearer glimpses of other realities beyond. Entire galaxies could be seen flickering inside the storm. Some were filled with unfamiliar constellations. Others revealed alien starships maneuvering toward the same dimensional gateway from their side of existence. The Convergence had become more than a collision. It was a bridge. And every civilization capable of detecting the phenomenon was now moving toward it. The fighting surrounding the vortex escalated as fleets attempted to push closer to the center. Imperial Star Destroyers fired continuous waves of turbolaser fire at approaching enemy vessels, while Mandalorian warships used their superior maneuverability to evade heavy weapons and launch devastating strikes against exposed Imperial hulls. In the middle of the chaos, dozens of alien armadas from unknown universes engaged both sides. Some fleets appeared highly organized, moving in disciplined formations as if commanded by experienced military leaders. Others resembled swarms, their ships moving in unpredictable patterns that made them difficult to target. The system had become a clash of entirely different combat philosophies. From the bridge of the Imperial flagship Dominion, Darth Vader stood watching the battlefield through towering viewport panels. The battle unfolding before him was unlike any conflict he had ever fought. During the Clone Wars, he had commanded armies against the Separatists. Later, he had crushed rebellious systems in the name of the Empire. But this war was something else entirely. This was a war between realities. Through the Force, Vader sensed countless presences converging within the system. Many were unfamiliar, their energy signatures unlike anything found within the Star Wars galaxy. Some burned with violent rage. Others radiated disciplined calm or alien intelligence that barely resembled the consciousness of organic beings. Yet one thing was certain. All of them were drawn to the vortex. Vader understood why. The convergence point represented power beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. Whoever controlled it could potentially access infinite resources, technologies, and armies from countless universes. For Emperor Palpatine, it was the ultimate prize. For every other faction present, it was either salvation or conquest. The Sith Lord turned to the officers surrounding him. "Push the fleet forward," Vader commanded. The Imperial fleet advanced. Star destroyers moved closer to the vortex, their heavy shields absorbing incoming fire from Mandalorian ships and alien warcraft alike. TIE fighter squadrons launched in massive waves, swarming enemy fighters in chaotic dogfights that filled the void with flashes of green laser fire and exploding debris. The Empire intended to seize the convergence by overwhelming force. But the vortex was changing faster than anyone anticipated. Without warning, a violent surge of energy erupted from the center of the storm. The dimensional lightning intensified, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Several smaller vessels were instantly destroyed as the wave of energy swept through the surrounding space. Even the massive star destroyers struggled to maintain their shield integrity as the vortex expanded. Then something emerged from within it. A fleet. But not like the others that had arrived earlier. These vessels were enormous, far larger than most warships present in the system. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered with glowing symbols that pulsed with strange energy. Each ship was surrounded by a distortion field that bent light around it, making the vessels appear partially out of phase with reality. Behind them came hundreds more ships. The new fleet moved with eerie coordination as it passed through the vortex, spreading into a massive formation that dwarfed many of the other armadas present in the system. Every faction on the battlefield paused. Even the Mandalorians slowed their attacks. Because the presence of this fleet carried something far more terrifying than superior technology. Power. Through the Force, Darth Vader felt the arrival like a shockwave. The ships radiated an energy unlike anything he had encountered before. It was not connected to the Force, yet it possessed immense strength, a cosmic power that seemed to exist outside the natural balance of light and dark. Whatever civilization commanded this fleet had mastered forces beyond the galaxy's understanding. The newcomers wasted no time. Energy beams erupted from their warships, slicing through nearby vessels with devastating precision. Several alien fleets were destroyed within seconds as the mysterious armada cleared space around the vortex. They were claiming the convergence. Imperial officers scrambled to analyze the situation as the new fleet began moving toward the center of the system. "Unknown vessels are engaging all forces," one officer reported. "Their weapons are penetrating shields with ease." Vader remained silent. The Sith Lord could feel the shifting currents of the Force responding to the new arrivals. The convergence was reaching its most dangerous stage. More realities were colliding. More powers were entering the galaxy. And the battle for control of the vortex had only just begun. Across the battlefield, Imperial ships, Mandalorian warcraft, smugglers, and alien fleets all began repositioning to confront the new threat. The system erupted into even greater chaos. Thousands of weapons fired simultaneously as every faction realized the same truth. If the mysterious fleet gained control of the Convergence, the fate of every universe connected to the vortex would be decided by them. The War of Infinite Realities had reached its climax, and the Star Wars galaxy stood at the center of it. The Convergence system had become something far beyond a battlefield. It was now the center of a cosmic collision that threatened to reshape existence itself. Warships from dozens of civilizations filled the void surrounding the vortex. The wreckage of destroyed vessels drifted through space like metallic storms while massive energy discharges illuminated the darkness with flashes of blinding light. Imperial star destroyers continued exchanging devastating volleys with alien armadas. Mandalorian fighters struck swiftly against larger vessels before vanishing back into the chaos. Smugglers attempted desperate escapes through collapsing hyperspace routes. But at the center of it all, the vortex continued expanding. The dimensional storm had grown into a colossal maelstrom that dominated the entire system. Within its swirling depths, glimpses of other realities flickered constantly, unfamiliar star systems, alien civilizations, and galaxies that had never before touched the Star Wars universe. The Convergence had reached its critical point, and the arrival of the mysterious fleet from beyond the vortex had changed everything. Their massive ships now hovered near the center of the system, surrounding the expanding dimensional storm with an intimidating formation. Each vessel radiated immense cosmic energy, and their weapons continued tearing through nearby fleets that dared approach too closely. Within minutes of their arrival, several alien armadas had been completely annihilated. Even the Mandalorians, warriors famous for their fearlessness, began withdrawing their ships to safer distances as they reassessed the overwhelming threat. From the bridge of the Imperial flagship Dominion, Darth Vader studied the newcomers carefully. Through the viewport panels, the Sith Lord watched as one of the massive vessels fired another devastating beam of energy into the battlefield. A nearby alien cruiser disintegrated instantly, its shields collapsing under the immense force of the attack. The power of these ships rivaled anything in the Empire's arsenal. Yet the technology behind them remained completely unfamiliar. Vader reached outward through the Force, searching for the presence of the fleet's commanders. What he sensed was deeply unsettling. The beings controlling those vessels were not Force-sensitive, but their power still resonated across the Convergence. It was a different kind of energy entirely, something vast, ancient, and deeply connected to the fabric of the other realities entering the vortex. The Sith Lord understood the implication immediately. These newcomers had not merely arrived by accident. They had come seeking the Convergence. Across the battlefield, other factions were beginning to reach the same conclusion. Mandalorian command ships broadcast encrypted signals to their scattered fleets, coordinating a temporary withdrawal from the center of the system. Smuggler vessels accelerated toward distant hyperspace exit points, abandoning any hope of salvaging wreckage from the battlefield. Even some alien armadas began retreating. But the Empire did not retreat. Darth Vader turned toward the command crew surrounding him. "All Star Destroyers advance," he ordered. The officers hesitated. "Lord Vader," one commander said cautiously, "their weapons are significantly more powerful than ours." Vader's mechanical breathing filled the bridge. "The Emperor has given us a mission." The officers exchanged uneasy glances before relaying the command. Across the battlefield, the Imperial fleet surged forward once more. 7 Star Destroyers advanced toward the vortex in tight formation, their heavy shields glowing as they absorbed incoming fire from the mysterious fleet. Turbolasers erupted from hundreds of gun emplacements, filling the void with crimson energy blasts aimed directly at the massive alien vessels. The clash that followed shook the entire system. Energy beams from the unknown fleet struck the leading Star Destroyer, tearing through its shields and leaving deep scars across its hull. Explosions rippled across the destroyer's surface as emergency systems struggled to maintain structural integrity. Yet the Imperial ships continued advancing. TIE fighter squadrons launched in massive waves, swarming around the larger alien vessels in an attempt to overwhelm their defenses. The battle raged with unprecedented intensity. Within the vortex itself, the dimensional storm reached its peak. Lightning-like arcs of hyperspace energy erupted outward, striking nearby ships and destabilizing navigation systems across the battlefield. The vortex expanded rapidly, revealing clearer glimpses of other universes beyond. Entire fleets could now be seen gathering on the far side of the rift. They were coming. Every reality connected to the convergence was being drawn toward the same point. The galaxy was no longer witnessing a single battle. It was witnessing the beginning of a multiversal war. At the center of the chaos, Darth Vader stood unmoving as explosions illuminated the bridge of the Dominion. Through the Force, he could feel the immense pressure building within the convergence. The vortex was becoming unstable. If the dimensional storm continued growing at this rate, the collision of universes might tear the entire region apart. Star systems could collapse. Hyperspace routes across the galaxy could be destroyed. Even the Force itself might be disrupted by the unimaginable energies gathering within the Nexus. Yet despite the danger, Vader understood why his master wanted control of the convergence. If the Emperor succeeded in mastering the Nexus, the Empire would gain access to infinite realities. Infinite armies. Infinite resources. Infinite power. But controlling such power would not be easy, because the mysterious fleet now guarding the vortex had no intention of surrendering the convergence to anyone. And beyond them, countless other forces from other universes were already approaching the gateway. The battle for the convergence had only begun. Across the galaxy, hyperspace continued fracturing as new rifts opened every hour. Worlds far from the convergence system began witnessing strange celestial phenomena as fragments of other realities appeared briefly in their skies. Civilizations everywhere realized the same terrifying truth. The boundaries between universes were collapsing. The Star Wars galaxy had become the center of an infinite collision, and whatever happened next would decide the fate of countless realities. In the end, the convergence did not belong to any single faction. Not to the Empire, despite the overwhelming power of its fleets. Not to the Mandalorians, whose warriors sought glory in the chaos. Not even to the mysterious armadas arriving from distant universes. The convergence belonged to the Force itself. As the battle surrounding the vortex continued, the dimensional storm reached a threshold that no civilization could control. The energies binding the rifts together surged beyond the limits of technology, beyond even the influence of the dark side. The Force adapted. Across the system, the vortex began collapsing inward, sealing the dimensional fractures that had torn open reality. Fleets scattered in panic as the storm released one final wave of energy that rippled across hyperspace itself. One by one, the rifts across the galaxy began closing. Ships that had arrived from other universes vanished back through collapsing gateways. Alien technologies left behind became relics of a moment when realities briefly collided. The convergence system itself slowly returned to stability as the dimensional storm faded. The multiversal war had lasted only hours. Yet its consequences would echo across the galaxy for generations. The Empire survived the crisis, though its fleets had suffered heavy losses. Emperor Palpatine would continue studying the fragments of alien technology recovered during the conflict, searching for ways to harness the knowledge of other universes. Mandalorian clans returned to their territories with stories of the greatest battlefield they had ever witnessed. Smugglers and bounty hunters carried rumors across the Outer Rim about the day when the sky itself had torn open. And the Jedi survivors who had sensed the disturbance through the Force understood something profound. The Force was not limited to a single galaxy. It was part of a far greater cosmic balance connecting realities beyond imagination. For a brief moment in history, that balance had faltered, and the Star Wars galaxy had stood at the center of infinite worlds. Whether the convergence would ever return was a mystery even the Force could not fully reveal. But one truth remained certain. If the multiverse ever collided again, the galaxy would never be the same.
The multiverse doesn't end here. New invasions, new empires, and new worlds collide daily. If you enjoy deep cinematic, what-if scenarios like this, Subscribe and join Multiverse Galaxy if